Hello and welcome to the Casually Profound podcast. I'm Lauren McLean and I'm joined today by three fabulous women to talk about ethical spirituality. So I have Rachel from I don't even know how to say it. Can you please say it?
Reckless witchcraft. Yeah,
Okay.
it's a mouthful.
Always a tongue twister for me. Always. And then we have Shuna on from Calgary, Alberta, and we have Minerva joining us all the way from Iceland. So these women all came from very different backgrounds, connected to me in very different ways. Rachel, I met on Instagram when I followed her meme page, Reckless Witchcraft, and she posts the most hilarious stuff all the time. Shuna and I met 8-ish years ago doing advocacy work together for post-secondary students in Canada. And Minerva and I met just recently in a social media class that we took with the fabulous Flynn Skidmore. So welcome and hello, and thank you for joining me today.
Thank you.
Having us.
You're welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Wouldn't do it without you. And so today we are going to kick it off with a little bit. I want to start on the funny side. I want to start with Rachel. I want to start with what kind of made you launch into this world. Your Instagram is very satirical satirical about the spiritual community, and I want to know kind of what got you into that and how you see the world through that lens, because it seems like a totally foreign concept to me.
Oh, that's a lovely question. I'll do my best to condense it for you. So I started Reckless Witchcraft about 4 years ago. It was originally called Voodoo Bullshit.
Mm-hmm.
I was experiencing a personal awakening, but I was in a great deal of denial that I actually was headed towards some of the spaces that I just thought were, to be honest, like ridiculous before. So it started as a satire page towards spiritual practices and spiritual people, because I just didn't get it. I come from a background of a lot of trauma. And I essentially saw people in this world as, I was like, there's absolutely no way that that's real. It's just, I don't get it. And then the more and more I, stopped denying my gifts, started doing a lot more digging and research, I was like, okay, there are aspects of this that are real, but there's a lot of things that are going on that I think are not ethical, and a lot of people being taken advantage of, people in really vulnerable emotional states, which I was, and I fell for a lot of scams, like psychic scams, psychic scammers. I would pay for some, mindset classes that just did not work. So I started kind of switching it into more of a critical review of it. And I've always used humor as like my number one outlet. So it just made sense to kind of pair the two. So I am in a space now where I am trying to figure out, what parts really resonate and what parts are safe. I think safety is like the biggest thing, biggest concern for me in this space. And so, yeah, that's kind of the roundabout way that happened.
Mm-hmm. So you came into it with this kind of lens of trauma, but I'm curious how then you see the world in general, knowing that you're using humor and knowing that you have learned from experience with this stuff. Like, how have you come to interact with the rest of the world, not just the spiritual community and that kind of thing? Like, is there an awareness that you have that stuff is unsafe, or that you're wanting to move kind of conversations in a different direction, or how does that feel on a day-to-day basis?
That is, it's been tough, honestly, because the past I'd say the past 4 years has just like completely shifted my worldview, and in a lot of positive ways, and in a lot of ways where it does make it more difficult because I have kind of changed the way that I even interact with everyone. So in realizing, a lot of the groups that I was in, or the people that I admired, were just, not not emotionally healthy or safe, I guess. So it's can be tough because I would consider myself a harsh realist. So having that worldview with the humor and the sarcasm, but also having just this spot on intuition and gifts that I cannot explain, I feel like two separate people a lot of the times. But I'm trying to do my best to integrate them. And there's a lot of self-deprecation that that happens with that type of worldview as well. So that's something that I'm really working on, is kind of reframing that I can take myself seriously despite the default of humor. So yeah, it's changed the way that I operate a lot.
Yeah, I definitely relate to that a lot, feeling that split between like I that makes so much sense. Minerva, you're nodding a lot. Does this resonate with you too?
Yeah, I think I was mainly immersed in your story and taking it in. But if I think about how it resonates, for me, I've definitely also had encounters with spirituality and a certain type of, you know, you are the creator, positive vibes paradigm that that in a ways have done perhaps more harm than good also in my personal life, and certainly with some of my clients as well, and now working as a self healing, self leadership coach. Like, I'm very mindful that the client is always the authority, like our inner world is always the starting point, and then gluing on top of that, gluing these sort of ideologies that are not necessarily in touch with the individual, or for example being trauma informed. That can be a pretty sticky space to be in, and there's it's very attractive to someone who's suffering, certainly, but not always safe. I think, as you say, Rachel, I also think safety is of utmost importance, not only when it comes to something as delicate as trauma, but also just in general when we're out there looking to expand and grow in some way. It in my opinion, it's all rooted in safety, because that's when it actually becomes accessible for us to step into something bigger.
So what is your practice for cultivating safety, Minerva? We'll start within yourself.
Within myself, and which is very much the same as in my practice, is to always start with what is. Like, you simply are where you are. I am where I am. I might want to one day be in a blissful, abundant space. Now those are just kind of poignant words that I'm using, and or wherever it is that I want to go, my starting point is like the most sacred step of the journey, actually. And so whether that's on a scale of growth, or just me starting my day to cultivate safety within myself is always to find out where I am, like find out where I am, collect myself from there, sort of not leave a part of myself behind, and then ask myself what is possible, and then do what I need to do to move towards that in my own pace, in my own rhythm. And sort of practically speaking, how that's done for me, I think nervous system work is quite important, to make sure that our nervous system, our biological safety withholding mechanism, is on board with what we're doing, and outside of that, also making sure that we're a complex, we're a elaborate, elegant human system, much more than the mind, much more than our conscious thoughts, much more than our positive intent. And so to make sure that our whole self is on board, I think is the key.
How long has it taken you to develop that practice and develop a safety within holding that safety practice?
Well, the practice is very much ongoing. It's really an art, I think, a constant like deepening of sort of the relationship with the self, and like any relationship, it has its like amazing smooth sailing, in love, honeymoon periods where the inner symbiosis just is on point, and then there's also rough patches where it's less easy to understand the self. But for me, I would say it's an interesting question. How long did it take? Because in a way it's instant. Like it's a paradigm shift. It's a saying yes to a certain new way of relating to oneself. And then on the other hand, it takes a certain amount of time, like putting in supportive practices, starting to sort of build the foundational sense of safety in however my system happens to thrive best. Then it takes a certain amount of time for it to sort of for there to have built a strong internal base. For me, I don't think I can give sort of a time frame. It's such a living organism. But I've made the choice for myself. I would say, I've also made the choice a few times in my life through different iterations. But I would say my sort of unwavering commitment to that and to myself was around 3.5 years ago, 4 years ago.
Cool. That's very cool. And Shuna, I'm curious, being a lawyer, you work a lot with clients and that kind of thing who are in situations that you're helping them advocate for themselves out of bad situations, that kind of thing, or into better situations. How do you notice this feeling of safety, and is this something that's conscious to you when you're working with your clients and that kind of thing as well?
Well, I think any lawyer should prioritize the safety of their clients. Fortunately, the industry I'm in, there's not a lot of scenarios where the individual might be in a situation that they're physically unsafe. I don't practice in family law, for example, which that can arise quite frequently, especially when you're in the midst of a separation, right? And I'm curious because I was thinking about what Minerva was saying and about how she takes her clients and then builds their ideologies on top of their self. And I'm sure that we have very similar scenarios where obviously every client that walks into my office has a background, has a belief system. And part of my job, and I think part of every lawyer's job, is to respect that belief in that system and work within that belief in that system to get the result that they need. Obviously, one of the less talked about aspects of that is how people engage with their religion or their spirituality or what have you, and making sure that you're really respectful of that you understand the limits, etc., so that you're pushing their best foot forward that also resonates with themselves. So, for example, there are religions out there that believe that you should only get what you're owed. So that means you can't have interest or something like that. So in Canadian law, you're entitled to an additional chunk of money just because it's taken 2 or 3 years to resolve your file or whatever. But they can't accept that. So navigating that piece where they still get what they're entitled to at law without impeaching their belief system, you have to kind of work within that. Sometimes it's donating that money, helping them figure out how to donate that money, or sometimes it's just saying, let's not even go there. And that's going to be different for every single person. And the reason I'm talking religion and spirituality kind of together, and I'm sure everyone's got some thoughts on organized religion, but really, from my perspective, they're kind of the same thing. It's just what is your belief system? What do you resonate with? And that, I think, has been an interesting theme, is that resonation. So safety is a key issue for sure. And you need to prioritize that, but you also need to prioritize someone's belief system, because at the end of the day, like Minerva, I work for a client and my job is to meet all of that client's needs. And part of that is making sure that you're, I think, understanding and patient and not putting bias, I guess, into the conversation and just navigating it that way. I don't know if that actually answers your question, but that's what I've been thinking about this entire time. So I thought I'd just put it on the table.
Yeah, no, I'm into it. I think it does answer the question, really, because it's looking at, like, we're talking about creating safety for clients, for the people that we interact with on these, like, intimate levels. And I mean, even legal work, like, that's very important to a person, right? Like, you're going through this huge ordeal to win a case, that kind of thing. And I like just respecting the beliefs and being able to observe their beliefs and then put those into action and that kind of thing. I think that's an important way of doing that, right?
Well, and I actually think a lot of lawyers forget that. We have an interesting job, at least in Canada and probably the US and actually probably the UK too, which is we're hired to be objective. And I think a lot of lawyers struggle with that because they're like, I need to make sure I'm being objective and giving my client all the information they need, but they forget to navigate that piece of who their client is. And you can be both objective and tie your recommendation into whatever that is. So for example, if there is a religious aspect where they can't accept interest, you can tell them what they're entitled to at law and then give them some options for navigating that. And then they can do what they need to do to figure out whether that's going to meet their needs within themselves, right? Because religion, spirituality, whatever, I really don't care what people want to call it. That's so important to who they are as a person, that I think we just have to be more mindful of that.
Mm-hmm. And I'm curious in general, I'm going to throw this out to the group. What does a spiritual community look like to you guys that is truly inclusive and accessible to people at all levels of the continuum, I would say? Rachel, do you want to start?
I thought a lot about this question, and it saddened me that I actually could not come up with a framework for it, because especially, and I know this can like go down a different rabbit hole, but with like specifically like white individualism, we don't have a lot of, like, I don't know what my roots are. I don't know where I could turn for ancestors even. And I think that we have, through colonization, we've just like obliterated all, former native ways of having those communities. And so I think more than ever, we need to be turning there, to where it was before when we actually did have those communities, because I don't know if I know of one of those that exists currently, at least not in, my region. So I would love to hear what, some of the framework of the other, these other beautiful ladies, what you guys think, because I just, I feel like it is budding, in an online space. I feel like I have a lot of people I can be in community with on Instagram, but it's not, it still has its shortcomings because we're not in community together in person. So, yeah, hopefully that answers it.
Mm-hmm. I'm not gonna lie, I threw that question in the pre-questions because I genuinely have not been able to come up with an answer for it myself.
Okay,
At all.
all right. That
I'm
makes
like
me
every time
feel
I come up,
better.
listen, when I was younger, I had this total this is how it's gonna be, and this is gonna be so great, and whatever. And then the more that I learn, the more that I'm like, what the fuck was she thinking?
It's discouraging though at the same time,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it. I hate past Shuna some days. I'm like, why did you make that decision? Oh my God. When is this going to come up again and someone's going to make fun of you about this choice? Oof.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, I also kind of paused a little with this question. And for me, it came down to mainly what's a spiritual community versus any community, and how to build any healthy community. And then I always return to systems and the fact that we're all systems. Like I am a system, my whole human system, like I just talked about, and now we're a system, us 4 individuals in this Zoom space, creating this podcast together. Like we have a system now to whatever I bring in is gonna affect Shuna in some way, and then Shuna is gonna pivot in some way, and then Rachel is gonna shift in some way. Like we're a living organism that's interacting all the time, and such is any community. And what makes for a, just as you said, Rachel, in the there used to be a stronger culture for community and for healthy systems, really, when we perhaps lived in a stronger union with nature and would sit in circle instead of on a pyramid, and sort of that interconnectedness is something that we've lost touch with to a large extent, I think. And that's kind of when we lose the touch with circularity, and how we are also, as I was saying earlier, about every client's self is the starting point, and then we build on top of that. Every one of us are an essential part of the whole, whether it's this whole of 4 right here, or whether it's the whole of our family system or our nation, whatever it is. We all carry sort of a little sliver of the collective consciousness, and the more that we can feel safe enough again to bring those voices forward and have arenas where we can actually hear each other's voices, I believe that's a way to build a healthier community, no matter which community it is. And sort of where we deviate from that, and kind of lose touch of the fact that we all know what we need to know, we all carry that self-leadership that's of value, then we start to build the pyramids and the hierarchies and look to the people who know best, and who know more than I do, and who know more about me than I do, and who know how to take me somewhere where I want to go, because I can't take myself there myself. And that's when we naturally gravitate towards a guru or a spiritual leader or a speaker or a thought leader who we sort of outsource our internal wisdom, like our internal understanding of the whole, to them.
More listening, less talking.
Yeah.
I think so. More listening, less talking, and more asking what is needed here instead of how should it be? Where should we go? What should happen next? Because the what is needed here always answers to the question of, well, what is there right now? Again, like the starting point is the only realistic first step to take.
Fair enough. It's interesting that you say that, and I'm sorry to jump in, Lauren, but my husband and I were just having a similar conversation, not quite the same. He's doing a lot of internal work right now, which is great. But he has big concerns about the communities we have today, similar to I think your thoughts. He doesn't think that we should be living in massive cities, and he thinks that massiveness of our community is what's perpetuating things like depression and anxiety and stuff like that. And we're supposed to be in smaller communities, a couple hundred people, that sort of thing. So it's kind of interesting that I had a very similar conversation like last week about this.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it's everywhere, right? Like, I think this is something that everybody's thinking about, is building communities and doing so in a way that really actually connects with people. Because I think social media had such a the whole push of the democratization of the internet, like it was so great at one point, and now there's kind of a disillusionment that people are waking up to, being like, oh, I don't actually feel more connected to people, even though I know 9 million people on the internet. Mostly because they haven't invited their internet friends to be their real life best friends yet. That's the secret. But something you said, Minerva, definitely keyed off on me. Actually, it was Rachel that was saying about the kind of more indigenous ways of being and that kind of thing, and recognizing that the kind of the pre-colonization social structures may have insight into how we can connect more as community. And with what Minerva was saying about what is, and taking our first step at documenting what really is, I think that my hypothesis is that, and if I could be proven wrong on this, that's totally fine. This is just a hypothesis. My hypothesis is that we actually innately know how to hold those circles and how to hold that society and how to hold those tribes and that kind of thing. Like, it's probably easier in small communities, like you were saying, and you and your husband were talking about the Shuna. It's probably easier to practice that in smaller communities, and I think that there is an innate ability in people to know that, but that our society these days is so big, and so there's so much going on, that there's so much external pressure or conditioning or whatever you want to call it, to act in various ways, whether it's colonization or your mom told you this or whatever the thing is, that there's not a habit of listening to your heart, and listening to that like actual innate wisdom. I think it's different than intuition. At least I experience it a little bit differently than intuition. Intuition is just like, it's like another voice, and it's like listening to the right radio station, but it's still somewhat like, even if it's internal, it's still a different layer of the internal, this like instinctive voice, or this instinctive ability to communicate and listen more than you talk, and to be in circle, and to exist outside of these structures of oppressive structures and that kind of thing, I think is on a deeper, like a very deep level of the internal world. Does this make sense to anyone?
I mean, I
I'm
definitely can
totally
distinguish. I can distinguish a gut feeling, which I think is what you mean by like trusting your heart versus instinctively knowing the answer, because that's not like an internal feeling.
Yeah, That I almost even want to say that it's like deeper than a gut feeling, because a gut feeling for me is like for me at least, and I recognize that not everybody follows the same logic system, is that like a gut feeling is like a yes, I'm going to go this direction, or no, I'm going to go that direction. It's not a I can't necessarily act from like or carry on from that place. It gives me like a very short window of like yes, no, right, left, like let's go here, go there. And then there's this like deeper knowing space that I can actually like act from and carry out a thing from. And I think that's the place that there's maybe not it's maybe not common to act from that place, but I think that that's where this ability to be human, is that too general, comes from. And like to to relate and to build those communities and that kind of thing on a bigger level. And it's so interesting whenever that you brought up the it's not just a spiritual community, it's all communities. I love that you brought that up because I specifically focused it on spiritual communities, knowing that that was not realistic and not really a real thing. But yet there's this total like culture on the internet of gurus and of the people that you hand your power off to that has become so sacred in a way, like it's the sacred cow. And I think it's fabulous that you brought up that it's actually all communities.
Yeah, I didn't know what a spiritual community is. And maybe it's because I wouldn't define myself as part of the spiritual community. So I was like, what the fuck is that?
I know that.
Just
Go for it.
so I'm just sitting thinking about what you said about the gut feeling versus the intuition and the connection between that two, like the lack of connection to the self these days, or listening to that inner voice or those many inner voices. And yeah, I don't think I have anything particularly smart to say about this, but just that I recognize what you're talking about. And it's interesting with the gut feeling conversation. It's also a language thing. I'm a Finnish person living in Denmark, speaking English every day. So there's sort of many different linguistic worlds that I live in, and that word gut feeling has a different connotation in all three of those languages, which is interesting because it means that we don't actually agree on what a gut feeling is, which makes sense because gut feeling coming from the gut, like the body is what holds our personal stories, and the body is what holds our personal history and trauma and tensions and memories and emotions. And so I might have my gut feeling might be a quick voice to speak because of my trauma history, for example. And also, the more that I do healing, the more that I work on myself, or I don't love the word working on myself, but the more healing that happens in my body, my gut feelings also change and those messages change. But then there is that message that never changes, which is I think, Lauren, what you're referring to with the intuition, which is more like when the spirit comes in, or when the whatever we want to name it just kind of comes through, and it's this clear as day sort of like there's not a hint of anxiety in it, it's just pure information. And let me see, where am I actually going with this? If just speculating, I have no idea, I've never thought this before, but it might be that the pure sort of intuition is the how to be human information that you mentioned at the end, Lauren. And then the gut feelings and the feelings from my body are answering the question of how to be this human. Like this body, this person, this system, this history, how does this one move about in this world? And then the more I am in harmony with this one, like the less I work against this one, the more the other type of clarity can come through about the Yeah, I'm interested in the fact that I would like to call it spirit, because I don't use that word all that much for myself. But do you catch what I'm sort of?
100%.
Yeah.
I'm speechless right now because it makes a ton of sense.
And
Rachel, do
Lauren,
you have
that's a
anything you can?
first.
I know.
Sorry.
Rachel, do you have any thoughts you want to add?
That I'm sitting in the same seat. That has a whole lot of clarity. And yeah, it's difficult too because there's a lot of weight in the words that we use, and I know there can even be like religious trauma or cult trauma connected to a lot of them. But I want to use the word like that collective energy or collective intuition, just the type of clarity and information that comes with like giving a shit about other people. And I think I don't want to get too much on a tangent, but I think that a lot of these circles that we see, or at least here in the US, they're very, very focused on the individual, and they forget about that whole other set that I think, just a note on what you said, that we innately have. Like I really think that, if we are, really tuned in and we've done a lot of inner healing, then we do start to, have more of a 360 view, and then we can take that healing out into community. And I think that's a big piece that we're not currently doing in a lot of spaces.
I'm curious how you've been able to live in that 360 view. And maybe it's a lot, maybe it's a little, I'm not sure, because that's definitely been a part that I've struggled with. I've definitely noticed that like there is this like 360 view to inhabit. And I also, at this point in my life, have no fucking clue how to inhabit me as a person and be myself, and also honor that 360 view. And so I've just defaulted to, I'm like, listen, I'm going to be myself first because I have no idea. It feels like riding two horses with one ass, and I have no clue how to do that. And I'm curious how that has shown up for you in your life.
It's a great phrase. I haven't heard that before. Riding two
Really?
horses.
Yeah, I haven't either.
I love that.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. I think I am in a position right now where I'm really trying to figure that out. Especially with the just heightened period of isolation that we've all experienced, the past few years. I was just like, I find myself like yearning for a community. And I don't know what that would look like. And I think a lot of it too is just learning how to accept people exactly where they are. I know we haven't like talked astrology yet, but being like
Get into it.
heavy on the Aquarian side here, I tend to expect a lot from people. I tend to like, one of my favorite phrases is like, just act right. Like just like give a shit about other people. You should care about making, people feel safe, generally, obviously if they're being abusive towards you or unkind, then, you don't have to just sit there and take it. But I think a lot of it is also just learning how to be indifferent, how to hold space for just a lot of different energies, and have a worldview of like everyone is coming into every social situation with their particular set of trauma and relational trauma. And I think we just have to adjust so much of our attitude. I don't know. I hope that it's different in other westernized countries, but here in the US it's been like the most divided that I've ever experienced it, and it's actually made me develop this like fear of other people or fear of being in groups. And I don't know the solution there, but it's disheartening. So yeah, I think I'm with you on that one. Long answer for that particular question of just like, I would really love to know how to have more of a 360 view and put that into action. I can say that I am there all I want, but it hasn't popped up in my active life yet.
And in the meantime, you find humor and sarcasm.
Yes.
What does.
Yes, it's the relief from the heaviness of it all, because it's very heavy. I think it's a huge diversion from the way that I would like to live, or a lot of people would like to be in communion with other people.
I think that heaviness is something that I felt a lot too. I mean, when we were in college, when Shuna and I were in college like 8 years ago, we were doing advocacy work, like with the government and that kind of thing, to get better situations for students. And at that point, it felt so simple of like, I can go have a meeting and get a policy changed. It's not quite that simple, but like that's the spirit of it. And but I can go and talk to someone, or I can go and make this connection, and then like I can have things changed, and I can move the needle, and I have my group, and I know that I'm doing things better for my group. And then I got out of college and into the real world, and then the whole just like culture of the world started changing, right? Like colonization started being talked about more than it had been, and like different intersectionality started coming up to like kind of pop culture levels and that kind of thing, right? And so then it's not just like, oh, I can have one meeting and represent my group. I have to represent my group and also think about these 6 other groups and that kind of thing. And so the weight with that, definitely was a lot to try and navigate. I ended up doing my working on my undergrad in political economy. I'm not done it yet, but doing a lot of work in sociology and that kind of thing, and looking at society and why does it why does this hurt? Why does society hurt? What is going on here? And the answers that I came up with felt so unsatisfactory. Like at the time, like I would write a big paper and I would come to a big conclusion and be like, yes, this is the problem for a world. And then 2 weeks later be like, what? How is that? There's so much more. There's so much more. And the answer that I think I've been living with since then, and this is totally not like the right way, and I am not advocating that other people should take this way, and I wish that I had a better solution for myself, has just been to be myself and to be like, no, I get to be happy. I can know that all of this heaviness is going on, and I can know that everybody is can you guys hear this dog losing its mind?
Yeah, just a little.
A little bit, not too bad.
Okay. So the solution that I've come for with myself is that I get to be happy, and I can know that all of this stuff is going on in the world, and I can hold empathy for it, and I can hold space for it, and know that it is not the end of the world. And this might be coming across as insensitive, and I'm going to own that I might not be taking into account every single person's individual experience. Because at the end of the day, it's like I can't control anything. I literally can't control anything. I can hold space for things. I can hold empathy for things, but I will not be able to solve all this on my own. And I don't know how to find my community to solve these things if I am not happy. And happy is an overgeneralization, but if I'm not living my best life. And so I have focused on that, and in that way have been able to meet people like yourselves, to have these kind of conversations with. So yeah, that's the only way I've found to navigate these two horses so far. Shuna, you've heard that saying before, haven't you?
Never.
Really?
Not ever. I'm like, that's not a Canadian saying, just so you guys know. It is a Lauren saying. Maybe a Manitoba saying. I don't know. We have a lot of horses here, so maybe people who have horses have heard it. I don't know.
It's pretty
I thought
great.
it was in like a Jeff Bridges movie. I thought he said that in a Jeff Bridges movie. Anyways,
I mean, it could have happened. I don't know. But to jump off all of this, I've been sitting here thinking, I love that you like made a joke about being very Aquarius. I'm very Scorpio.
Yes.
It hurts. So I feel that. No, I have never had an issue with like being myself ever. I could give two shits what someone thinks of
I
me.
can attest to this.
And like I often get emails with like accusations of my ethics and who I am as a person. And a lot of lawyers take it quite personally and have a lot of issues with that. Seek a lot of therapy around it. I'm like, oh, they're having a bad day. Whatever. They'll be fine in 2 weeks. It's fine. Like I know who I am, so I don't care. And I've always been like that. I think I went through a period maybe in high school where I tried to be someone I wasn't. And I was like, no, this feels gross. Probably Shuna seniors raising me the way that way. I don't know, but it's just always been a thing. But I have been having issues with the matching energy lately. And so I've started getting angry at people because they're not giving me what I want. And I've realized that I'm either setting my expectations too high for what they can provide right now, or I'm not communicating that expectation. One of the two things are happening. And so what I've been working really hard on is checking in with people's energy levels so that I know what to expect, right? So if they're at a 1 or a 2, I know we're not going to be having like a riveting conversation. You know, it's going to be like, let's get to the point, and then I'll take myself out because you don't have the energy to provide what I need. And then I'm not mad at them or frustrated with them anymore. And I don't know, it seems to be helping my relationships, which is good. But then I also know if I'm at a 5 and I need another 5, I'll probably call Lauren because she's usually at a 5. But you know, it's one of those things where you just find the person that can provide that element almost. But it's made a big difference in my happiness, I guess, for lack of a better definition.
It almost feels silly to use happiness as the metric these days. I'm like, I don't know where the fuck that's coming from, but it seems like that's superficial now. It seems weird. Like,
Yeah.
Well, happiness or whatever. I mean, joy or being resourced or being well or whatever it is. But some, like, I mean, yes, we live in this sort of you know, toxic positivity culture in many ways, where happiness is like the baseline that we're supposed to have, when it's actually one aspect of the huge, you know, human spectrum that we all fluctuate between all the time. But on the other hand, it is like a very, very fair thing to want to be consistently experiencing. And you know, speaking to the heaviness of the world, and then where does that leave me, the individual? Like, especially if we have any sort of empathetic tendency to us at all, we actually get to be quite mindful of that. We can have compassion for the heaviness. We can do I mean, like Lauren said, we can't control any of it, but we can influence it, and we do get to like step into the responsibility of doing that. And at the same time, the heaviness does not need to enter me. Like I get to take care of myself and not feel guilt about the wellness that I'm able to have, at the same time as I do what I can to alleviate the unwellness of another. And I do, like, I used to work on an organizational level with organizational development, much with the same principles of healing systems from within. And if we start to organize better, run our companies better, then that's going to affect our outcomes and policies and and the ripple effect is going to, you know, extend upwards and upwards, until I actually realized that it does all start and end with the individual. Like the more that we as individual entities, individual people find that inner alignment within us, as in bring our internal system to a balanced state, then like every time I come closer to myself, all the people around me develop a little bit more ease. Every time that I speak more of my truth, it becomes that much more accessible for the people around me to speak theirs. And equally, if I'm feeling like crap, if I hang out with a friend who is, you know, just in touch with the fact that they're a great person and they might even still remember that I'm a great person, then my mood is going to lift rather than me dragging that person down, because the highest frequency does in fact win. And so that's why I really like, this Gandhi slogan of be the change you want to see in the world. I used to look at that and just think like, what a load of bullshit, until I realized that that's actually true, because the only thing that I have like full agency over, not always, I mean, I'm also a total fucking mystery to myself, but I have agency over making sure that I'm okay, making sure that I'm well, making sure that because when I'm well, I'm in touch with my mission. When I'm well, I'm in touch with the collective truth. When I'm well, then I'm able to, see and understand the 360 rather than have my ego be sort of wrapping itself around itself only. And so the better I am, the better my immediate circle around me gets to be. And then their circle, and then their circle, and then their circle. Because we are an interconnected human race. Like it really is the people that we come into contact with face to face that we have a huge impact over just by being together. And so, and that's a great thing. And it might feel futile because we really want to reach up there. Like we want to change the bigger questions. But how does change actually happen? I mean, let me know what you think too, all of you. Like change, it is an incremental shift by shift by shift by shift, a cumulative pivoting into something that happens from within, unless it happens through a huge disruption from the outside, like a meteor strikes Earth and then all the dinosaurs die. Fair enough. Human race is obliterating itself from the inside out by killing the planet very slowly, which we're now, of course, trying to shift to be another trajectory. I have no idea where I even took myself in this rant.
I think that's the problem with podcasts. Sometimes you like start talking and you're like, I've just put words on the table. I hope you can make sense of it. That's your job, Lauren, right?
Yes, that is my job. And I think I know exactly where you're going with it. And I think that what you were talking about with that, like, we're all hoping for we want to influence the world in these really big ways. And like, as a fellow heavy Aquarius, that's 100% on my mind. A lot is like, is I want to influence the world in really big, really noticeable ways, that kind of thing, right? And I also have a lot of Leo in my chart. Hi. And I think that what you've talked about, like these, change is these small incremental things. It is this small, it does happen on the individual level. That's where I've been for a long time, is that like society is a collection of individuals. And when things change on the individual level, the needle of society moves very slowly because there's so many pieces in society, right? Like that dominant culture moves slowly because it takes literally one by one individuals changing their mind and changing their mindset to accept a new way of being, to accept a new set of social rules and that kind of thing, and social norms. And so those big changes, so in hearing what you said, Minerva, what is totally clicking for me is that heaviness that I have let myself experience, because society is not doing what I want it to do, comes from holding those big changes and those big leaps in a higher regard than my own individual changes, and overvaluing those big leaps, when really in society, over history has seen those giant leaps happen, and they are not fun. Like, it's not actually what we want. There's been a lot of instances in society. The only one that's coming to mind right now is the Roman Empire. That's a weird example, but how, like, when things fall quickly and when they fall far, the results are catastrophic and set us back a long ways. And so the gradual changes are actually the more powerful ones, and the ones that can feel good in the moment, right? Instead of anguishing over these large changes that we want to happen in community, in society, and all those kind of things. What do you think, fellow Aquarian Rachel?
I'm trying to, kind of stewing on all of it, ruminating. Because I heard this joke that was like, Aquarians care more about like the human race as a whole than they do the individual human. Like, which I can totally feel guilty of. But I do think it's like that gradual change piece is super interesting, because even on the individual level, if you try to think about changing something overnight, your nervous system is like, nah. So yeah, it can be incredibly frustrating, especially I think from people who have, like, people like us who have that like very realistic, like observational overview of things, and see the systems that need to change, and know the like mindset programming that we've been like indoctrinated in. It can be really frustrating to be patient with that, and not just want to like, scream everything from the rooftops, but it's gonna take time, unfortunately, unless there is something catastrophic, which we don't need another thing. So yeah, I'm trying to kind of sit here with myself and develop some like some patience, because
I'm actually now sitting here listening to you thinking that you shouldn't. Like, this is not something that you should dumb down at all, because this impatience, the urgency, the voice, like, that is that's essential, because that's the thing that gets the slow incremental changes moving. Like, that's what gets someone. I have a million planets in Capricorn. Like, I don't care about anyone but myself in many ways. And for me to hear your words, witness your emotion behind those words, like, okay, now we're talking. Like, now I also sort of remember what we're all here for. You know what I mean? Like, for you, it's, as long as it's channeled into this needs to change right now, you are going to have to feel the personal futility of how impossible that is. But actually knowing that I'm missing the word, but like how much gravitas this has, or the gravitas that there is coming through you for someone like me to be able to hear it. And that's the value. Like, that's the essential part of the process of, that's the part that your essence plays in getting the pieces to shift.
Thank you for that. That was a very beautiful perspective on on something that I definitely struggle with.
I gotta say, Lauren, this conversation's way too profound for me at 9:20 in the morning.
Did you see the title? It's casually profound.
I know. I was actually, I was thinking about the conversation we were having earlier. Well, I think, Lauren, you touched on this about, recognizing that there's not just our community, there are other communities, and part of our job is to make sure that those other communities are heard, which we did a lot of, right? When we did advocacy work, right? One of our big advocacy initiatives was to get funding for Indigenous and Inuit students, right? Mm-hmm. So because of that, I think about that often. I also, one thing I've been working on is recognizing my privilege in society, because I'm a lawyer, right? You know, I have literally access to change. And it's a slow game, like any change, but things change because of decisions that happen around the work that I do. My work is maybe less exciting than, say, criminal law or family law or what have you, but it's still important. And making sure that you create a space at the table for those who don't have access to that change is so important. And I know it's something that, as a legal community in Calgary, Alberta, we've been working on for a long time, especially with Indigenous people. They actually have an entire court that's built in a circle for sentencing for Indigenous folks, so that they can have their elders there and they can have other aspects of their culture there, and do it as a community, the sentencing, rather than as a predominantly white justice system dictating why this happened and what should resolve it, right? And Lauren, you probably know this, we have special prison systems as well that Indigenous people can access that are community-based rather than your standard terrible prison system. But don't get me started on that, because I'll go on a big rant about how there's overrepresentation of Indigenous people and all that jazz, and nobody wants to hear about that today. It's not the topic. So the point being, you do have these aspects of change, and making sure you create a seat at the table and listen, and your change as an internal person might have more impact than you think it does, right? This conversation is going to go with me to work on Monday, and is going to be something I'm thinking about for probably the rest of my life, whether I know it or not, right? It's going to be something that's built in. And this idea of big change, really, in our current state of the world, is with communities that are, no offense, not our community. It's not white women that need to be propped up right now. It's other communities, right?
Yeah. Hey, does anybody have any closing thoughts, any words of wisdom, anything that we want to get out there that you didn't have a chance to say earlier?
I think the only closing thought I have is, Rachel, you can make a much more bigger impact than you think you can as an individual, just by being you.
Thank you.
I would totally second what Minerva said too, and that you pack a huge punch in what you say. Like, it's what you are feeling, I'm feeling when you're saying it. So that's what you're saying and feeling comes across very clearly.
Thank you. That's a definite wound of mine, is communication in general. I'm better in writing form, which is another reason why the memes come up. But I feel very seen and very understood by you ladies. So thank you. Not to turn this into like the me story, but I really, really appreciate what you've said, and it's gonna make my whole year.
Good. Good. Make your year and take it great places. Okay. So with all of that, thank you so much for joining us on the Casually Profound podcast. If you're listening to this and you want to join the conversation, please send me a message. You can reach me on Instagram. I am Lauren, like literally, that's my handle. I am Lauren on Instagram. And you can join us, send me a message, and we will go from there. Thank you very much for joining us, and we will see you next time.